Does Alexander Volkanovski really deserve the winner of Max vs. Ilya at UFC 312 in Australia?
Well, that's what he's hoping for because he's waited this long. We know Volk doesn't like to take layoffs in his career. So today we're going to break down, does Volk really deserve the winner of UFC 308? And what is this talk about an interim title in an active division?
First off, we need to start by talking about what Volk has done recently. So we're going to go over his last 5 fights. Everyone knows he lost to Ilia Topuria at UFC 298 in that heartbreaking round 2 KO.
It's brutal. Still hurts to watch.
Before that, we had the round 1 TKO loss to Islam Makhachev. That was another heartbreaking loss. Luckily though, it's not all bad because before that, he beat Yair Rodriguez with the round 3 knockout. Before that, we know the infamous, one of the most legendary fights in UFC history, the loss in the decision to Islam Makhachev when he first tried to go up to become a double champion. And before that, we had his win over Max Holloway at UFC 276 in the third of their trilogy.
That was probably his best fight. That's probably when he was at his peak. That third Max Holloway fight, he just outclassed him 50-45. Unbelievable performance. I actually just watched that one back and it made me appreciate how good Volk is and how good Topuria was to beat him as well. Now Volk's been on a decently long layoff, which, let me say, he deserves that. But at the same time, does he deserve a title shot coming off of, what is he, 1-3 in his last 4 fights?
It's tough because you have to think about, does Volk deserve it coming off of the layoff and 1-3 in his last 4 fights? I think it really depends on what the UFC wants, you know? Do they want Ilya to come out and beat Volk again? Is that worth it for them? Is the chance that you have to take with Volk versus Ilya there? I really don't think if Ilya wins that he's gonna fight Volk next. I think the way that Volk fights for the title is if he fights Max Holloway in a 4th fight to headline UFC 312, because I think Max is also more likely to go out and take that fight 3 months in the future, where Ilya, who took a very long layoff, a 10 pay-per-view layoff in between his last 2 fights, and it felt like the UFC really had to push him to take that fight. I think it's a tougher negotiation for Ilya to fight Volk for a second time when Ilya's gonna be like, I just beat him. You know, why does this guy deserve to fight me again? I just knocked him out in the 2nd round.
Yeah, Ilya was hard to convince. That's what it seems. From the outside perspective, obviously we don't have inside information what goes on in those negotiations, but from an outsider perspective, it looks like the UFC had to convince Topuria to take this fight with Max Holloway, or at least give him a lot of money to take this fight. And imagine if Topuria goes out there and beats Holloway. I guess this video is going to be posted right before that, so it's going to be interesting to see. But imagine he goes out there, beats Holloway. Imagine how much power he's going to think he has. He just beat 2 of the best featherweights of all time back to back. If he KOs them both, he's going to be like, I can do whatever I want. And the UFC is going to be like, please fight Volk again, because we want UFC 312 in Australia.
What I think the best plan in terms of the UFC, what they would want the most, is if Ilya has a super dominant knockout over Max, you have an early announcement that Ilia Topuria is going to go up and he's going to face Islam.
Really?
I think that is the narrative I've been hearing. That is the reason that you would have the potential interim title fight, would be because Ilya, if he wins, is going to go fight Islam, and then you can make the Diego Lopez versus Volk interim title fight at UFC 312. I don't love that because I think that Lopez beats Volk.
Yeah, Volk versus Lopez is one of those intriguing fights where anything could happen, especially it's kind of like Topuria versus Volk at 298. We were like, how good is Volk coming off this head kick KO with a power puncher like Topuria? Now we're going to see if this interim title shot happens. We're going to see the same thing. How good is Volk coming off 2 KO losses and a layoff to Diego Lopez, who's on a historic rise right now?
Like, it's really tough because I would actually favor Lopez against Volk.
Really? I wonder what the odds would be. That would be interesting.
It would be tough. I think that they would probably lead Volk.
Probably.
There would be some value in Lopez.
Yeah, and if that fight took place at, where are they doing it? Sydney in Australia at 312? That's going to be one of the best buildups. Volk coming back to his home crowd, and then Diego Lopez, who's a star in his own right, trying to take down Volk, get that interim title. I mean, I would love to see that fight, but is it realistic? Only if Topuria moves up to lightweight, which personally I don't think is going to happen.
Breaking down our 3 options. UFC 312 main event, how would you rank these? Fighting Max Holloway for the belt in a 4th fight, fighting Ilia Topuria for the belt in their 2nd fight, or fighting Diego Lopez for an interim belt?
Okay, first,
in terms of how much you want.
Yeah, no, I get it. For the bottom of the rankings, it would have to be Max versus Volk 4, because we've seen that fight 3 times. We've only seen Topuria versus Volk once. And again, those circumstances were a little bit sus. And then Diego Lopez, we haven't seen that fight at all. So Diego Lopez, is that 2 or 1 for me? Probably that's the most exciting fight to make because it's a new matchup. Diego Lopez, I want to see him get some sort of title shot. Topuria, I think, could just do the same thing again.
Yeah. So for me, in terms of excitement for those 3 fights, Ilya versus Volk 2, I really have no desire to see that fight again because I don't see you having a different outcome. You know, I really struggle to think that Volk could beat Ilya at this point. Second, I have Lopez versus Volk because I think that fight would be very competitive. You know, I think it would be it would be a better version of Lopez versus Ortega at UFC 306.
Right.
And then first, obviously with me being such a big Max fan, I really want to see Max versus Volk 4 because I think that this would probably be their most competitive fight yet.
Yeah, it could be, but are you not kind of done with that storyline? We've seen it 3 times.
Because there's new storyline. Max coming in as the champion, and if Max can get that win over Volk, it's like, you know, it's very storybook. You know, he finally did it. You know, he slayed all these dragons. You know, he beat Korean Zombie, he beat Gaethje, he beat Ilya, and then he beat Volk.
That is
you know, it's very like get back to the top.
That is a crazy record if he does that.
Yeah, like that is crazy. My last question I have for you, Lucas. If Volk comes out, fights at UFC 312 in any of those 3 fights, because those are realistically the only 3 fights that are really being considered.
Yeah.
What happens if he loses?
Oh.
Is retirement in front of his home country, is that an option?
No, retirement is not an option. Volk is too stubborn. I can guarantee you he's not going to retire, even if he gets KO'd again. He's going to go on a bit of a downfall if he gets KO'd again, I think. As scary, as horrible as that is to say, because Volk is one of the most lovable guys, if he gets KO'd for a 3rd time in a row, I don't see his career going on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, has no chin at that point.
Yeah.
What if he wins the championship in his home country? Like, if he wins the interim belt, that really doesn't mean anything, but you can go out as a champion, you know? Like I really struggle to find Volk being able to compete against Ilya Topuria. You know, he's not going to get back to the top. And I don't think that a move to lightweight really helps him either because those guys just hit harder.
Yeah, a move to lightweight would probably not be the best. Obviously, he could have some fun matchups like against Dustin Poirier, maybe for Poirier's second last fight, or against a Charles because Charles is more of a grappler. He doesn't hit quite as hard as those guys at the top like Gaethje, for example. I don't know. There's a lot of career moves because he is such a high-level fighter. But if your chin is gone, your chin is gone. Mm-hmm. You can't really do much about that.
And you don't really want to go and just tarnish your record. Like if you go on 2-5 run to end your career, like that really doesn't help your record, you know? Why not just go it on the top when he has such a future in terms of like sports media? You know, we both have talked about how we think he could be a future commentator, how we think he'll be a big part of the UFC even after he retires in the ring.
Yeah, so if he loses, let's say he loses to, I think the most likely thing that's going to happen, they remake that Topuria fight. If he loses to Topuria in Sydney, who does he face next?
Aljo? Guy doesn't hit as hard, competitive. Evloev?
Ugh, Evloev, disgusting. If Evloev beats Volk, I'm gonna jump
Or
off.
you go retirement tour and you have him go and fight Ortega, you have him go and fight Yair. But I would be scared in a Yair and a Josh Emmett matchup because if Volk has a late career loss to Josh Emmett,
that's brutal.
That's really bad for your resume.
I could see him doing more of like Poirier doing, where he has 2 or 3 more exciting fights that are just fun matchups for the fans, right? There's no real title aspirations. Obviously, right now in his career, he still has title aspirations, but let's say 2 more losses, you might have to give those up.
That is going to do it for us today. Let us know in the comments who you think Volk should fight in the main event of UFC 312. Make sure you guys subscribe. We have a ton of UFC 308 content, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.